Laura's work I appreciate. This is Diana's second time with me through retirement. And she asked me what I was going to do. I haven't asked her yet, what are you going to do? You know. But anyway, I wanted to just share a few thoughts about something better today, because I want to go back to about 1954. One of the things that I was concerned about, and you're going to get a baseball story, okay, so you can just relax and say, if it hadn't been for baseball, this guy would have never been able to preach, because it was every week almost that there was one or two in his sermons. But I was determined that what I would be in life, I would be like a 17-year-old from Iowa by the name of Bob Feller, who at that age was signed by the Cleveland Indians. Threw the baseball at about 100 miles per hour, his fastest fastball. And had a tremendous career in Cleveland, and he became my idol. Because I was a pitcher. I'd played third when I wasn't pitching in the outfield once in a while, but my love was on the mound, throwing to the strike zone. And I was bound and determined that indeed I was going to be a professional baseball player. Well, as it so happened, there was a fellow by the name of Hal Shoemaker that I've shared with you on other occasions, I think, who was a music director at the First Baptist Church there in Charlotte, North Carolina, that they invited to come to my home church where the state line, North and South Carolina, splits the property, and you could always tell almost who lived in South Carolina and who lived in North Carolina by where they sat in sanctuary at Flint Hill, because the state line split the church property. But Hal would come in August to have what we called in those days the August meeting. Now, I don't know whether St. Mark's ever had August meetings like we did, but I know that used to be the way churches did things, was twice a year they would have a revival. And ours was always in the spring and always in the fall. And Hal Shoemaker would always come in the fall. And Hal Shoemaker is the one man who would look at me and he would say to me one question on several occasions with a year in between or so. He would say, Roger, don't you think God has got something greater for you to do than to stand on the mound in Yankee Stadium and throw a baseball? And I would look him square in the eye and say, no, Hal, I don't think so. I'm going to the big leagues. But you know, here I stand. The one thing I was never going to be was a lacy-collared, sissy preacher. Never. Then one night in 1954, a drunk driver ran a stop sign as I was on the way to the airport to pick up my dad, who had worked the 3 to 11 shift. I'd had the car so I could do a little running around. I'd just gotten a license a little over a year. And we'd had an activity at the high school, and I started back. And Zeb Mullis, who worked at the airport that my dad knew, drunk as a skunk, ran a stop sign as I came through the main highway where he was supposed to stop. And he totaled my dad's brand new Chevrolet. And the only thing that I got out of that accident was a broken nose where my face hit the steering wheel and I broke it in two. Zeb ended up in the hospital with more serious conflicts. But I think that got me to thinking, boy, why was I saved? Why was I spared? And out of that, beginning to question, to look at my life and what life was all about, I began to think in terms of Hal Shoemaker's question. Don't you think God's got something better for you to do than play baseball? But I had made up my mind I was going to Duke University that had the top baseball team at that time in the Atlantic Coast Conference, because I could probably get signed out of there. And my parents said to me, you can't go to Duke because only rich kids go to Duke. And you aren't one of the rich kids. You got to understand where you came from. I said, I'll get a scholarship. I didn't get a baseball scholarship because even like today, they didn't give those many away at that time, but I did get some academic assistance. And the Andrew B. Duke Scholarship, I became a recipient of some of his great wealth. I went to Duke, I played ball, but then in 1959, after only being there 2.5 years, I went to Mr. Hauser, Phil Hauser, who was the general manager of the Charlotte Hornets, that was the Class A farm team of the Washington Senators. And I'll always be indebted to Phil Hauser because he did two things for me. He was the general manager of the ball club that gave me an opportunity to be in spring training and to have my chance to be a baseball player that I was going to be. Because that's where I was going. Roger was going for that. The last article I have a copy of that was in the sports page is me saying, this old arm let me down. I'm not sure I would have made it had I been signed. But I'll tell you what, I had made a commitment to Phil Hauser. And his only condition of me going to spring training and playing baseball and signing was this: Roger, we will take you, provided you promise me one thing. You will go back to college, because I was a second semester junior at Duke when I walked away, took one exam, and accepted the grades the professor gave me on the other 4 to go to spring training. How bad did I want to play ball? I wanted it. It was life. But Mr. Hauser said to me, I've got more old baseball players who can do nothing but drive a taxi cab or pump gas at a service station. And if you'll promise me you'll go back to college, we will give you the chance that you're looking for. I said, Mr. Hauser, I promise you. And I went back to school, working full-time, school full-time, and I graduated. Went to seminary the same way, because I'd made a promise to Phil Hauser. But in the process of all that, there was Hal Shoemaker. And out of that accident and all that began to happen in my life, I realized, you know what? There is something to do. And I answered the call to what I felt like was God's calling of me through the influence of Peter Marshall, that chaplain of the U.S. Senate, Presbyterian minister, his wife's writing, Catherine Marshall's, and his whole story out of Scotland. And the impact of course, Hal Shoemaker's question. Don't you believe God's got something better for you to do than stand on the mound and throw a baseball? And I want to say to you, I've had something better. Because you see, what I have noticed about God is that He made us and gave us life in the very beginning. And we're God's creation. And because we are God's creation, He loves us. And He will do anything in order to maintain and to reach out and have fellowship with us. He's like the little boy that I shared with you, but it's one of my favorite stories, who got a piece of balsam wood and wanted to make a little boat. And he carved out this boat, and then in the hull he got a stem off of a tree limb, and then he made a little sail, and he looked at his boat having painted it red, white, and blue, and he thought, wow, this is great. And so he runs out of his house, and he goes a few blocks down where in the town where he was living, I understand there was a lake. And he takes that little boat with its sail, and he puts it in the water. And just about time it gets in the water, there's a slight breeze that comes and pushes it out toward the middle. And the little boy stands there and realizes his boat's going away and he can't get it. And suddenly the Creator is disappointed. And he turns, having lost his boat, and he walks back crying. A couple of weeks later, he's downtown in this small town, and most of those small towns in those days had pawn shops. And as he goes by the pawn shop one day, on the way to the store to get some candy and bubble gum, and I hope it was Snicker bars and a Coca-Cola gum. But just out of the peripheral vision, as he passes by the pawn shop window, he sees red, white, and blue, and he turns suddenly, and he looks, and he sees, that's my boat. And he goes in childish excitement, and he says to the man behind the counter, hey, sir, that's my boat out there in your window. Where did you get it? And I want it. The pawnbroker, owner of the shop, looked at him and said, young man, that's my boat. That's the price on that boat. If you want it, you'll have to pay for it. The little boy left despondently, went about his way, but decided he could do some chores maybe and make some money, pick up a little dollar or two here for doing things around the house and to his neighbors. He got the money. He takes it, he clasps it, I understand, he runs back downtown. And sure enough, there's the little boat still in the window. And he throws his money up on the counter, and he says to the pawnbroker, young man, I want my boat. There's the cost of it. Pawnbroker counts out the money, gives him what change is coming back, and then walks to the window and brings the boat to the little boy, hands it to him, and the little boy takes his little boat, and he's heard to say as he walks back out on the street through the door of the pawn shop that's open, little boat, you're mine, twice mine. Once because I made you, twice because I bought you. And my friends, in the brokenness of my life, when I had lost it all and was wandering in no place to go, because just as something beautiful has been sung today, that the Gaithers put together, that helped change my life, all I had to offer was brokenness and lostness. And I wrapped them up, the love of Christ, and I laid them at the foot of the cross. And something beautiful God has made out of my life. He got me. He redeemed me. He paid the price. Little Roger, you're mine, twice mine. Once because I made you. Twice because I bought you. And I've had a tremendous ministry, you see, because God loved me enough to stay with me and stay after me, when at times those that I had been raised by and those that I had been brought up with wanting to do nothing and have nothing to do with me. See, here's the thing about it. God made us and God gave us life. And that's what we celebrate today. And we celebrate the fact that God sticks with us through thick or thin, no matter what. And He loves us, and that love makes a change. Another quick story of another little boy in a pet shop. He's looking for a dog. He happens to be an amputee. He's a young man who's lost both legs. But his parents told him that he could have a dog. They took him down and he went in the pet shop. He looked around and he said, "Don't you have some other little dogs maybe?" And the owner said, "Oh yeah, I got one more. But he's back in the back, but you wouldn't want him." Said, "He's sick, he's going to die. There's no need for you to even take him." He said, "Let me see." And when that little fella saw that dog that was in such a condition, he said to the pet store owner, "That's the one I want. I want that dog right there. How much is he?" He said to him, "You really don't want that dog? I'm telling you, that dog is going to die." And about that time, the little boy who was in long pants stepped back. He pulled up his pants legs so the shop owner could see his artificial legs. And in the ramblings of this adult to this little boy about how he didn't want this dog because he was useless and was dying and was sick, the little boy looked at him and said, "Mister, you just don't know what love can do." And suddenly, this pet shop owner looked down and saw an amputee and saw the look in this kid's eye. And I think he got the message of just what love can do. And that's the way old Roger was. I discovered God loving and caring, and I want you to know something. I don't know about you, but I can tell you, you just don't know what love can do. Because today, it was my brother Jack who should have been a minister. And here I am with you, enjoying and having had a rich experience, and able to share with you and say, God made us and God gives us life. And He chooses to stick with us. And His love blesses us and leads us, and He calls to us. And you know what? Hal Shoemaker asked the question, don't you think God's got something far more important for you to do than to stand on the mound in Yankee Stadium and throw a baseball? And I want you to know something. That God called me. And when He called me to pitch the gospel in the game of life. Something better than baseball could have ever offered me. Jesus came by design and through His sacrifice on Calvary and His resurrection on Easter morning, friends. He brought us love, forgiveness, hope, strength, courage, and faithfulness, and eternal life. I ask you, how could baseball ever compare to that? And just to think, God called me to pitch the gospel in the game of life. Wow. What a privilege. Amen.
Please let us stand and join in singing number 389, Freely, Freely.